Boker Tov, Chodesh Tov. Today's daf is daf Kuf Yud Beis, the last daf in Ksubas, as we learned for Shlom for Elazar ben Reuma. Yesterday we left off 8 lines from the bottom of Kuf Yud Aleph on the base. 8 lines from the bottom. Rav Chia Barada Mikri Dardeke Rish Lakish. Obviously, these last 2 dafim we're talking about the beauty of Eretz Yisrael. And that's how we end off the Masechet. And so Rav Chia Baraba was a Bible teacher, a children's teacher of Chumash, of the children of Rish Lakish. Mikri Dardeke, he was the school teacher, the Rebbe of Rish Lakish's children. Having Ifker Fasiyama. He went away for a couple of days. He didn't show up for 3 days. You know what we call the pagra. You know, when they're on vacation, when they're resting. Below also, he didn't come. Ki also when he showed up, Amalei Amaye, because Rish Lakish said to him, "Why have you been missing?" Amalei, my father left me over one vine. But Yomri, the first day, I harvested from that vine 300 clusters of grapes. Eshkel Agrav. Each eshkel, each one of the 300 produced a keg, a cask of wine. Yom Sheni, the next day, but I also harvested 300 clusters of grapes the second day. Now, to produce one cask of wine, I needed 2 clusters. It wasn't as productive. Yom Shlishi, the third day, but I also harvested 300 clusters of grapes the third day. Now it took 3 clusters to make one cask. In other words, it produced less each day. And I gave more than half. I gave away to the poor people. I made it hefker. I abandoned it. Amalei, Shlaka says, Elav, you not missed Haviyav the Tvei. In other words, you stopped teaching Torah to the children for 3 days. That's why it was getting worse. And had you not missed, it would have even made more. It wouldn't have gone down. It would have made more. Rami Cheskel visited Bnei Brak. He saw some goats, the Ka'achlan Tusei, they were eating underneath a fig tree, the Kontif Dufsha Mitaini, and honey was flowing from the figs. In other words, we know honey, there's bee honey, and there's date honey, and there's honey that comes from figs as well. And honey was running from the figs. The Chalbatayef Minayu, and the goats who were eating it, they had milk was running from them, goat milk. They were producing goat milk, and goat milk was running out of the goat's mouths. And the honey from the fig trees and the milk from the goats was mixing with one another. Amar. So when Rav Cheskel saw that, he said, "Hainu zavas chalvat bash." This is what we mean when we say the land flowing with milk and honey. Amar b'Yaakov ben Destoy. From Lud, from the town of Lud to the town of Ono, is about 3 miles. I think it is that way today too, you know, Ono and Lud, or maybe it's a little bit more. One day I got up early in the morning, and I treaded in by foot ad karsule until my ankles. In other words, I waded through all the honey. It was up to my ankles as I walked from one place to another. Midvash sheltain, just from the fig honey. Maybe you can learn from there. If dates produce more honey, it's even more. I saw the flow of milk and honey of the town of Tzibari. It was 16 miles by 16 miles. That's how much honey was flowing. That's how much the land of Israel produced. I saw the flow of milk and honey. Shall call Eretz Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael. And as I've Israel, Eretz Yisrael. And if I were to put it in one spot, if I were to condense it all into one area, the Have can be Beichisi, it would take up, if I added up all the different areas of flowing of milk and honey in Eretz Yisrael and put it in one area, it would be as big as the area between Bei Michsi ad Akra de Tulbani until the fort of Tulbanki. How much is that? Chav Beis Parsi, 22 parasangs, that's like a few miles, or its length, the Pus Yashisa Parsi, with a width of 6. It was 22 by 6 parasangs. It would be a large amount of area. As if you took all the areas that flowed with milk and honey and put them together, it would consume that one rectangle. Rav Chalba, Rav Avir, Rav Yossi, Rav Chanina, these 3 hours, so they visited a town. Isakamaya Farsika, somebody brought in front of them a peach, Davi Kilfis, Kafarhino. It was as big as the pot of that place. They had a pot that they used in Kafarhino, which was a very large pot. The Ilfis Kafarhino, how much does it hold? Akamahavi, how much is that? Hey saw, 5 saw, a large amount, a very large measure. So they visited this place and they saw a peach that was that big. Achlu shlish, they ate a third of Kir shlish, they abandoned a third, they made half Kir to the poor people. Nasnu, if they abandoned shlish, they gave a third of the peach to their animals. Lashana, a year later, Ikla Rav Elazar Hassam, Rav Elazar visited there. Okay, so first it was Rav Avi, Rav Yosef Chanina, and Rav Chelbo. A year later, Rav Elazar visited the same place. They bought him a peach, and it was fit into his hand, a much smaller peach. The year before, the peaches were gigantic, humongous. Now it was fit into his hand. But Amar, he says, Eretz Prilim Lecha, the land that was fruitful turned into a salt waste, because of the evil, the people who lived there. People lived there that caused the produce of the land to be, like we said, to be less productive, to be much smaller. He went to that town called Gavla. He saw these clusters of grapes. They were so big, it looked like a calf standing there. That's how big they were. They weren't just usually vines hang low. These were so high, they looked like a calf. What's going on over here? Are there calves here among the vines? Why would you have calves among the vines? They'll consume them. Amalei said, no, Ketufeninu. They are clusters of vines, vine clusters of grapes. They're just so big that it looks like that there are calves standing there. Amar, what did he say, Rabbi Shubal Levi? He said, you're producing so much for the goyim who live here. Amar, Eretz, land, O land, Tachnisa Perisacha, put your parents inside. In other words, don't make them spring forth. For who are you producing so much fruit? To the Arabs, these Arabs who rise up against us because of our sins. The Arabs are going to have all this. So what are you producing so much? Lashana, a year later, that's what Rabbi Shubal Levi had said. Right? He said, you're producing so much, it's going to be for the goyim. A year later, Lashana Ikla Rav Chilas, when he went up there, Chazim of the Havikami Keize, he saw also that the vines, the clusters of vines were very big, let's say as big as goats, maybe not as big as calves, big as goats. Amar, Izim Ben Ekfanim, are these also, you have goats here among the vines? That's what it looks like. Amalei, no, Zil, Lo Tavid Lon Ki Chaverach. Get out of here. Don't do to us what your friend did. Meaning, your friend cursed the good fruits that we have because we were mostly goyim living there. He says, no, don't curse that. Don't do that to us as well. We don't want that curse, so please leave. Tana Rabbanim, the B'chaseh Shel Eretz Yisrael, in the good years, when the years were blessed, when the years in Eretz Yisrael were blessed with great produce, they saw an area of a base saw that's like 50 by 50, 2,500 square amos. Osa chameshes ribu korin. An area of a base saw can produce 5 times 10,000, 50,000 core. 50,000 core of produce could come out of one area like that, a 2,500 square amma area, which was unbelievable, right? Minus blessing. Well, it was very, very big. You can't have a peach. Can you have a peach as big as a 5 saw pot? They're very big, very big. Produced an awful lot. How do we know? Bishivasos shel Tzoan in the prosperity years of Tzoan. Tzoan was in Mitzrayim. Tzoan was a city in Mitzrayim, or a state in Mitzrayim. Bishivasos shel Tzoan, they saw Osa Shivim Korb. Now, how do we know this whole cheshbon? Because in Tzoan, Mitzrayim was one of the most fertile areas, and there they saw only produced 70 core. We're comparing 70 to 50,000. Tremendous difference here. So he said Osa Shivim Korb. The Tanya, how do we know? Rav Meir, and Beishan. I saw in the valley Beishan. Today, Beishan is part of Eretz Yisrael. During history, it happened. It belonged to different areas, or maybe the valley is not the same as the city. But in any case, the Bikas Beishan, Rashi says, is part of Shara, so it's not part of Eretz Yisrael. But Rav Meir said that I saw the Bikas Beishan, which was a standard area, let's say, outside of Israel. Beishan also Shivim Kor, made 70 Kor. That's what it did. And the greatest, most fertile land in all the lands is Eretz Yisrael Shenemar, Kigan Hashem Eretz Yisrael. The pasuk says, like the garden of God, Eretz Yisrael. So therefore, like Eretz Yisrael, and so on was the most fertile area of all of Egypt. Because the kings used to live there. they were raised there. The Sifki Hayu, but so on. Sora says that it's officers, the officers of Egypt, where the Jews had to, so to speak, pay tribute. They had to go to the officers of Egypt, who lived in so on. Okay, so if Rav Meir said that in Biket Beit Shan, which was, let's say, a regular area outside of Israel, produced 70 kur, a Beisah produced 70 kur. So Mitzrayim could have been no less, right? Because Mitzrayim was the most fertile area, and so on was the most fertile area of Mitzrayim. So we can assume that in so on's prosperity, it also produced at least 70 kur, no worse than Beit Shan. There's no more rocky area in all of Israel, more than Hebron. That's where they bury the dead, in Hebron. So that's what's used for a cemetery, not for growing crops. So Hebron was the most rocky, most unfertile area of Eretz Yisrael. Even so, Hebron mavuna alachas mishiva, and so on. Hebron was 7 times more fertile than so on. And mavuna means it's built on. What do we mean by built on? It means it's more productive. The pasuk says the Hebron sheva shanim nidnasov Mitzrayim. Pasuk says Hebron was built 7 years before so on in Mitzrayim. What do we mean by that? What do you mean built? The city of Hebron was built before so on in Mitzrayim. Elamid nidnasam mamash was built. Efshar adam bona bayis lebno katan kadam shavivna lebno gadol. Would a father build a house for his younger son before he builds a house for his old son? Shemer says, Bnei Cham, who were the sons of Cham, who was Masida Bnei Cham. This Cham, of course, was one of the sons. Shem Cham was one of the sons of Noach, as we're going to read this week. Ubnei Cham Kush uMitzrayim ufut ukran. So Mitzrayim, which was one of like a grandson of Noach, he built him his area. It's called Mitzrayim because that was his name before Canaan, which was where Hebron was. Eretz Canaan. So you can't say that Hebron was built before Mitzrayim. That doesn't make sense. Elishem mavuna alachas mishiva b'tzoan, meaning that it was more fertile. Mavuna, vibana mishamimena means like more. Rashi says it's lashon pri. It's fruitful. It's more fruitful. Like vibana gam shanoch imena. Like he says, I will be more fruitful based on her, meaning that she will have children. Quotes that pasuk. That's what Sarah said. Allah shemavuna alachas Mitzrayim, meaning it was more fruitful. It's like 1/7 of the area in Hebron can produce what the same area, what 7 times that area would produce in so on. That means that Hebron was 7 times more fertile. And what does that mean? So 7 times more fertile means what? If we said that Mitzrayim must produce at least 70 kur, no worse than Beit Shan, right? Produce 70 kur. So if Hebron was 7 times more fertile than that, how much would that be? 7 times 70 is how much? 490. 70 kur times 7 would be 490, right? And that's a rocky area of Eretz Yisrael. Hebron, the honeymeal betrashim, that's a rocky area. Aval shelo betrashim, if it's not rocky, would be even more. Chamesh meal, we add a little bit more, not 490 kur. So if it's not rocky, it'll produce, let's say, 500. We're talking here conservatively, right? It would be at least 500. The honeymeal shelo, that's an area that in an era or a year that wasn't blessed. Because we're talking about when it was a blessed year. What does it say? What a blessed year? By Yisrael Yitzchak Beretz, Yitzchak planted that year. Well, what does it say there? Me'ah Sha'arim, 100 times as much. 100 times 500 is how much? 50,000. 50,000, which is what we started with. We make 50,000 kur, which is 5 times 10,000. That's how he comes up with the cheshbon. Tanya Amar Yosi. Saw Yehuda Haisa, a saw in Yehuda, a saw of fruit would produce Haisa Osa Chamesan. You really, from there, miraculously, it could produce, even though a saw is a measure, so it's not a weight, it's a measure. But from that measure, it produced 5 other saw. What is that? Saw came first. It produced a saw of regular flour. Saws of then it also produced a saw of fine flour. Saw subin also produced a saw of bran. Saw mursa of coarse bran. The saw kiburian also from inferior flour. It produced all that. It's good when you it's proper and nice to praise your land, because your land, Eretz Yisrael, really is praised. How do we know? My father left me a Beisah, that area, 5,000 square amos. From there, I produced oil. Produced we said like foaming wine, good wine. Ibor. From there, we produced grain. Kitnius. We also had pulse, legumes. And my cattle also grazed from there. So all that they saw produced all these things, oil and wine and grain. I had enough to produce. I was able to grow many things and enough to produce not only for the family, for the people, but also for the animals. Amaleahu bar Amaroy, the bar Arad Yisrael. An Amorite who had lived in Eretz Yisrael. Remember, that was one of the 7 nations that we conquered. So an old man who said, Labar Yisrael, to a young person, a young Oleh, let's call him a young Oleh. Rashi says that when he came into Eretz Yisrael, also the Kamagud Yardena, that there's a tree there that's on the bank of the Jordan River. You see that tree? Kamagud Risu, no matter how much were you able to harvest from there? Amalei Shisin Kor, I was able to get 60 Kor. Amalei Lo Ayil Suba, you didn't improve it. Akati Achavisa was the Gersa. You've made it worse. You made it worse. Why? When we had the land, right on the border, including the bank of the Jordan, I produced twice as much, 120 Kor. So we were able to harvest from the tree 120 Kor of fruits. So the Jew answered him, I meant to say one side of the tree. There were 2 sides. There were obviously they were split or something. It was split in a way that you could tell there were 2 sides. He says, I thought you were asking about this side. One side produced 60, the other side produced 60 also, so I was able to get the same 120. Amar Kista, Midas, the Pasuk says, and I will give you Eretz Chemda, a land of desire, right? A pleasant land, Nachlas Svi, an inheritance of the deer. Why is Eretz Yisrael compared to a deer? Lo Melcha, to teach you, just like a deer. It's once you skin it, once you take off the hide shrinks. It shrinks. It contracts. And if you would try to put that same hide back on the animal, it wouldn't reach. It wouldn't go all the way around. So just like a deer, once you have the hide, it could not contain all the meat. As it couldn't contain the flesh underneath it. It produces so much fruit. Eretz Yisrael, when it's blessed, can produce so much fruit that it can't even hold it. There's no place to put it. Or another explanation could be matzvi. Why is Eretz Yisrael compared to its feet? Matzvi zekal mikol. It's just like the deer is the swiftest of all animals. It runs very quick. Af Eretz Yisrael kal mikol haratzos lavashal. Eretz Yisrael is also quick to ripen its fruit. The fruit ripen very quickly. Lavashal perusel. You might say, well, a deer, yes, it's very swift and runs fast, but it doesn't have very fat meat. Its meat is not very fat. You want a good juicy piece of meat. Maybe also Eretz Yisrael is like that. It ripens quickly, just like a deer runs quickly. Eretz Yisrael ripens the fruit quickly, but its peiros are not very fat. It's flowing with milk and honey. It's fatter than milk. I guess they're talking about 3 or 4% milk, not the skim milk, right? It's fatter than the milk. And sweeter than the honey. Now, Eretz Yisrael has all these advantages. Not only does it produce a lot, but it produces it quickly, and the chalav, the meat is fatter than regular milk. Let's say it's got more fat content, and it's sweeter than honey.
Eretz Yisrael is not like the deer.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like a deer.
No, it's different than the deer.
It's like a deer, but it's also better than a deer. Like a deer in that it's swift and that it produces a lot, right? And that that the deer's skin cannot, the hide cannot contain the meat. The same way Eretz Yisrael's produce cannot be contained. It produces so much, and it's very swift, but it doesn't have the disadvantage of the deer in the sense that it's fat. It produces good fat. Rabbi Lezer, when he went up to Eretz Yisrael, Omar, he said, Paltili michada. When he came into Eretz Yisrael, he said, I've been saved now, I've been rescued from one curse. When he got smicha there, Amar Palti Limitarti. Now I've been saved or rescued. I've escaped 2 curses. When he was appointed to the intercalation council, the council of sages who decided when to add an extra month and when to add an extra year, etc., or when to add an extra month to make it a leap year. I've now escaped 3 curses. Shenemar. What are the curses? Shenemar. My hand, God said, I will put my hand against the false prophets who see false things. And it says, Besodami lo yiyu. They will not be in the secrets of my nation. What do we mean? Zeh sod ibur. That's the sod ibur. The secrets of how to intercalate the year was given over to the sages. And that was one of the curses. The people who were bad were not entitled to be in that council. So number one, you see, when Rabbi Lazar went up there and he was appointed to the council of sages. So for the Sod Iber, so he says, okay, I wasn't in that curse. At least I've been rescued from that curse. Utsav Beis Yisrael lo yechtavu as esmicha. And it says, the pasuk goes on over there that my hand will be against them. They will not be in my council, in the council of my nation, and they won't be in the writings of Beis Yisrael lo yechtavu. Zesmicha, that refers to smicha. They won't have smicha, but since Rabbi Lazar got smicha, he says, okay, now I've been rescued from 2 curses. They will not come into the land of Israel. Kamashmo, they will not come into the land. Well, Rabbi Lazar got all 3. It was in reverse order, right? But he came into Eretz Yisrael, so he was saved from that curse. He got smicha, he was saved from the 2nd curse, and he was appointed to the council of intercalation, so he was saved from 3 curses because all 3 curses didn't apply to him. Rav Zera Kavisal Eretz Yisrael. Rav Zera went up to Eretz Yisrael. We learned yesterday Rav Zera's Rebbe Rav Yehuda discouraged him from coming to Eretz Yisraal, but Lamaisi he came. So Rav Zera Kavisal Eretz Yisrael, when he came to Eretz Yisrael, Lo Ashkech Mebra, he couldn't find a ferry, I guess, to cross in the Jordan. The Jordan, in those days was a big river, not like today where you could just hop over it, and there are certain places it's dried up. Maybe it's, it depends where it is. So when he came into Eretz Yisrael, he couldn't find a ferry to take him across the river. Lo Ashkech Mebra Lamaber, Nokat the Metzra. So he held on to a rope bridge. What do you mean by a rope bridge? When they didn't have a proper bridge, they would just throw a plank across from one side, from one bank across to the other one. And then they would tie a rope high up on, let's say, on trees or on large poles from one end to the other. And then you walked on the plank. If you just had the plank, you'd fall over. You wouldn't be able to balance yourself. So you held on to the rope that helped you balance, and then you were able to navigate and walk across the plank. So he walked across that plank, and he didn't want to wait for a ferry or for some proper way. Like he, so to speak, he says, I'll take my chances. I'll go across the rope bridge to get there quickly. And he passed into Eretz Yisrael the way. So one of the apostates said to him, Amma Fasiza, you rushed or hasty nation, you're a mixed up nation. The Kadmisu Pumaychalu that your mouth came before your ears. What? Because you said Nasa Vinishma, right? First you said, yeah, we'll do it, without understanding it. Before you heard the rules, Nasa Vinishma, then we'll understand it later on. You people who were hasty and said Nasa Vinishma, Akati Befizu Saichu Kaima. So you're still hasty. What did you have to run across here for? You took a chance just to get to Eretz Yisrael. You couldn't wait for the ferry. It's coming in a couple hours. Amalei, a place that Moshe and Aaron were not zocher to come into Eretz Yisrael. How did I know if I wait that I will merit going in? If you wait too long, maybe I won't merit going in. As soon as I had the opportunity, you grab the opportunity.
Why would it stick?
Huh?
No, seriously.
Yeah.
Why not? To make this just to be negative.
Starting up. You wanted to start up.
They were anti-Zionists.
I guess so. They were anti, but they were anti the Torah. You just wanted to curse them. They wanted to start up with them, I guess. I don't know. Rav Abba Menashe Kippur de Akko. Rav Abba, when he came into Eretz Yisrael, he kissed the cliffs of Akko, the stones, the rocks. Like you say, people that get off the plane today, they get on the floor and they kiss the land of Eretz Yisrael. So they learned that from Rav Abba, who kissed the cliffs of Akko. Rav Chanina Metaking Mitkele. He used to fix the stumbling blocks. In other words, the roads had rocks, and they didn't have proper roads. So he used to fix that. Why did he do that? Rashi says the last line on the page. Mishava, he would even out the roads, and fix the stumbling blocks of the city. Because he loved the land. Love Machazer, and he would go across the land and fix the road. People shouldn't say bad things about the paths in Eretz Yisrael. As he himself went, and what you call today the public works, the public works said he went himself and he saw something in the road, blocking the road. He fixed it himself because these people shouldn't say bad things about the roads in Eretz Yisrael. Rav Ami, Rav Asi, these two rabbis, Kaimu Mishamsha Latula Mitula Shamsha. People complain. Somebody complained to me last week how long it took to get his license. He just made Aliyah and he had to be in the license office and they didn't have a copying machine there. They had a copying machine. Complained they didn't have a copying machine to copy his American license. Complaining, these rabbis, they would sit kind of mishim, so it was very hot in the summer. So they got up and they sat in the shade. They didn't want anybody to complain. So we'd get up and sit in the shade. And if it was when Mitula was a time there was a shade or like a there was an eclipse or something, and there was no sun, like we had an eclipse here yesterday, partial eclipse. So then he went into the sun, and as he went to the sun, they shouldn't say that, oh, it's too hot here, it's too cold here. You can manage, do anything to manage and to say good things about Eretz Yisrael. Chia bar Gamda, Megander Ba'afra, he rolled in the dirt, in the dust of Eretz Yisrael. Shem Pasuk says to fulfill this pasuk, Yiratzu Avadecha Es Avanah, because your servants desired its stones, the Esafari Chanenu, and they loved its dust, its dirt, right? They loved the dirt in Eretz Yisrael. They offered the dirt, they loved the dirt. He rolled in it to show how much he loved Eretz Yisrael. This is all the Chibas Eretz Yisrael. So even though we had on Kufyam base the famous of Chaim Shita that maybe Aliyah doesn't apply, that was in the day when it was dangerous. Not dangerous now to come to Eretz Yisrael. So here today, there's no excuses. Amar of Zera, Amar of Yirmiyah, Barabba.
Talking about the land, not the people.
Amar of Zera, of Yirmiyah, Barabba. Dor sheben Dor ba, the Dor sheben David ba, the generation in which Mashiach will come. Category b'tamid chacham. There will always be people prosecuting and going against them. Always finding fault with the rabbis. That's what they said. So Rav Yirmiyah said this, and he says, when I said this in front of Shmuel, Amar tziruf achar tziruf. It'll be one curse after another. Rashi says one decree after another. They'll always be trying to find fault and to make decrees and to discourage the Tamid Chacham. The pasuk says, even if only 1/10 is left, they've destroyed already 90% of the people. Only 1/10 is left. They will still continue to destroy. They'll still continue to afi chashavas. They'll try to destroy even the last 10. There'll always be people who are plotting against the Tamid Chacham. Tanur of Yosef, there'll be plunderers and plunderers following the plunderers. One after another, there'll always be people going against the Timcham. That's a sign when things are bad and there's fights and stuff. They'll be fighting against the rabbis. That's a sign Mashiach is coming. Amar Chia Barashi, Amar Rab. Asidin kol ilan esrak. We want to end off with a nice line. So the Gemara ends off with this: that eventually, at the time of Mashiach, at the time when the Gula will come, all the esrak, even the non-fruit-bearing trees, will also in Eretz Yisrael, they will also bear fruit. Even the non-fruit-bearing trees will also bear fruit. Shnei the pasuk says, "Ki eitz nasa pirio," because a tree bore its fruit. Ta'ein of a gefen nasnu chelam, and the figs and the vines also bear their assets or their masses. They will also bear a lot. Now, ta'ein of a gefen, we know are fruit-bearing trees. Obviously, figs and vines are fruit-bearing. So what does it mean by eitz? Eitz must mean the non-fruit bearing. That's right. We already talked about fruit bearing trees will bear fruit. So what does that refer to? Also So there will be trouble at the time of Mashiach, but eventually good things will happen, and Eretz Yisrael will be blessed like we see it's blessed today. Not only do we make high-tech things, but we also can produce a lot of food. That ends off the last parak, Masalika, law of Masechet Ksubos, and we finish Masechet Ksubos this way. And we'll begin Mr. Shem Nedarim tomorrow. What's the basic idea? A neder, there's several psukim in the Torah. Throughout the Torah talks about neder, an oath or a vow, and a shvua. The main difference between neder and shvua is neder is that the item is forbidden to you. It's an isser on the chayfetz. And a shvua is where you swear that you're not going to eat something or you will eat something. The punishments depend on if it's a lav shem b'mais or lav sheish b'mais, and we'll talk all about that. But the key of a neder is that it's on the item and a shvua is on the person. Also, the neder we talked about will be also like when you say this thing is usher to me, like a carbon is usher to me. The truth is you can make an neder and just say this item should be usher to me. But if you attach it to something else which is usher, it's got to be something which is usher because of a neder. For example, if I want to give a carbon and I say, okay, I'm sanctifying this carbon, giving it to Hegdish, and then I say, so I made that usher to me by a carbon. Carbon, if it's Hegdish, nobody could have enough from it, only the base Mikdash. And if I say now that this other item, this sandwich is usher to me like the carbon, that's a valid neder. If I say this sandwich is usher to me like chazer, which is not a neder, the Torah forbids you from eating that. That's not a neder. That's not a neder. And if I say it's because it's not usher to me like chazer, it's not chazer. But if I say this is usher to me like something else, which I made usher to me, or like somebody else made usher to them, that it was done by a neder, that's a valid neder as opposed to a shvua. And then we'll talk about the kid. The Masechah begins with, kol kinu yadram. If it's a substitute, if you didn't say it in the lashon of a neder, but use the substitute lashon, or you didn't say the whole lashon, that's a yad. We'll talk all about that when we begin the Masechah Me'ez Hashem tomorrow. Hadrach Masechah Ksubos. That's the end of Masechah Ksubos. Hadrach Alan, and you will return to us. Masechah Ksubos v'daitach Alan. We shouldn't forget you. You will not be gotten for us. Lo ba'alma dain lo ba'da'asi. Hadrach Masechah Ksubos v'hadrach Alan. Daitach Masechah Ksubos v'daitach Alan. Masechah Ksubos lo ba'alma dain lo ba'da'asi. Hadrach Masechah Ksubos v'hadrach Alan. Daitach Allah Masechah Ksubos v'daitach Alan. Nashi minach. Right, will not be forgotten. You will not be forgotten. Us, lo ba'amadain, below ba'amadasi. Not in this world, not in the next world. Here's something like I was saying. Torah should be our that should be what we occupy ourselves with. It'll be us next world. Chanina bar papa, Rami bar papa, Nachman bar papa, Choy bar papa, Abba Mari bar papa, Rafa bar papa, Rochush bar papa, Sukkah bar papa, Ada bar papa, Dar bar papa. Papa made great siyums in those days. Harb not Nelahainu, as different Sorascha, Sorascha Bafino, Wafio Samcha Beis Israel, Venia Kolano, Nachman Setzain, and Setzain Beis Israel. Yirei Shemecha, Veloner Sorascha, Miavet Chmenem Tzach Gila, Mili, Yidi, B'Shokech Laman, Oy, V'Shlamat, La'olam Loeshket, V'Gudecha, Kibam, Chisen, Burchatan, Olam Dein Chokech. Amen, 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 Salavoy. Modem Anachnu, Fnachnu Elihai, Ve'Eleh Basai, Shesamta Chokenu, Samta Chokenu, B'Yosh Reis, and Medish, Samta Chokenu, B'Yosh Reikonos. Shana mashkim, hey mashkim. Anu mashkim divrei Torah, hey mashkim in Mudvar Metalim. Anu amelim, hey amelim. Anu amelim kabel schar, hey amelim, hey kabel schar. Anu ratzim, hey ratzim. Anu ratzim, hey shachas. Anu ratzim, hey ratzim. Hey ratzim, hey ratzim, hey shachas. Anu ratzim, vanu ratzim chayim. Avashin emar ba'atol hem taridim hey shachas. Anshe dim mir malirtz meim aniach dachbach. Here something nechad in oil high. Shem shas the time of the sign Masechtas Ksubos. Kentas rain lahaskom sachtas usvar machirim ul saimam lilmod ulamed lishma v'lasus l'kamis kodum sechabi avo uschus kol tanam amaramat mechacham yamod li ulazari shelo tomash ator mipi umipi zari v'zerazari ad olam v'yiskayim bi b'salechatan chosach b'shach b'chot tishmo alecha v'kisas yitisichecha ki vi yirbu yemecha v'yosif v'lachashnos chaim archim amamina v'smol lo shevachavod adonai osam lo yitain and ayivarechim v'shalom.
Doesn't make it work. You'll see we have a meeting.
Kadash Kadash May Rabba. Who also is Kharata or Lachma, so Laska Hayoma, Methakatu Yishlam Shafala, who the Shafal Hefala, the Gabab,
Ulemeter Pulchara Nukra Mi'ara, Ulaska Pulchara, Ishmael Asra, Yamna Futshabraku, Malkusevi Kore, the Payakon, the Son of Payakol Base Israel. Bagalo is man, Caribbean Rome, say. Isador, Visala, Visalo, Shmed, Kuchabri, I saw what about the Mason, Mason, the right, so the Ashkatish, I think, the people of Asar, Basarian, and Foshamra, the Rakan time, the every day. Robin, Robin, Roman, Shulam Shmaya, behind the Malay, about Polis Robin, Roman, Session Rafu, Yasser, Rahman, Shamalay, about Polis Robin,
Mazel tov.
Tomorrow morning we'll start usual time, the Dharm at 5:20. Have a good day, everybody.
Take care. Beautiful. Mazel